Okay.
Hey, good morning, everyone. It's another Monday. It's July 29th, and that means it's time for another episode of Chatting with Agnes and Cecilia, where we discuss topics of importance to the 501c community. Today's topic is strategic planning supports mission fulfillment. As always, we're brought to you by Rogue Tulips LLC. We specialize in 501c consulting and association management services. Check us out at roguetulips.com. We're also a proud supporter of the 501c League, a virtual membership organization for all members of the 501c community and the people who love them. Check out the 501c League at the 501cleague.net. And we are here again on another Monday. Hello, Agnes. How are you?
I'm doing well, Cecilia. How are you doing?
Oh, pretty good. It's a nice day here.
Very much so here too in Florida. And hello to all our audience globally. We look forward to sharing our knowledge and strategic planning. Over to you, Cecilia.
Great. Thank you, Agnes. So we only have 15 minutes, and as Agnes pointed out, this is a deep topic, so we could probably talk about it for 15 hours. So what we're going to do is hit some of the high points and some of the things that we feel as professionals are very important to keep in mind. So the first one is, why would you hire a consultant for strategic planning? And that's very simple, actually. It's objective because a consultant can come in and they can see things that maybe you don't see anymore. I like to use this example of, I tend to keep a lot of stuff on my desk. And so sometimes I know there is a memo on that desk or a report I'm trying to find, and I just can't see it anymore because I've seen it too many times. And so I ask somebody else to come in and I'll say, I'm looking for this report. Could you please find it? And they will usually find it within 5 seconds because it's a new pair of eyes. And that's why it's important to hire a consultant to work with, because they bring in a new set of eyes and they see all the potential in your organization and they see all the opportunities and they see the ways that you could make all of the things happen that you want to make happen. So that's really why you want to work with an outside person on your plan, and a strategic planning project can be anywhere from 3 months to 18 months, depending on the timing of the organization, how in depth they want to go, how large the organization is, and what they're looking at. So keep that in mind as well. You probably do want to spend at least 3 months on a strategic planning project, but again, it depends. That's the classic consultant response. It depends. But one of the other things that's very important here at Rogue Tulips is we believe in having a philosophical basis for what we do. We are very committed to our 7 pillars of success. And a lot of that is driven by professionalism, continuing professional development of ourselves, and being ethical toward our clients and each other. But one of the most important things about strategic planning is a lot of people say they're strategic planners and they come in and they say, oh, I'm a strategic planner and I will walk you through a facilitation. And they have people slap post-it notes up on the wall. And it's like, that's all well and good, but that's not strategic planning. Strategic planning should have a philosophical basis. And our first most important one is this one, The Art of War by Sun Tzu. You may have heard me talk about this book many times. I've presented on this many times, Lessons from the Art of War for Strategic Planning. This is a classic book. Why is this book a classic? Why has it been around since ancient times? Because it's got a lot of good information in it that's very practical for today's world. So that's one of our philosophical bases. Our second one is A Spy's Guide to Strategy. Now you might say, ooh, a spy. But what are spies around for? To gather information. So what's important about strategic planning? Having good data, being data driven, and having good information. Also, A Spy's Guide to Strategy, I have to recommend this book if you haven't read it. It's written by a former CIA agent. And he has a lot of good information with a lot of graphs explaining things like zero-sum outcomes. Ooh, that's a good one. You can get that book on Amazon, just like any copy of The Art of War. There's different versions of that book. So look for a more modern translation, and it's much easier to understand. So these are philosophical basis. We look to others for guidance as well and learn from them. We don't depend just on our own knowledge. We have a basis that we can refer back to. And when it comes to The Art of War, the most important lesson you get from that book is patience. And they say patience is a virtue, but patience is a necessity when it comes to developing a plan and implementing it. So that's our philosophical basis that we work from. We're also data driven. What does data driven mean? We have to do a lot of research. Now, after you do all the research, you can do quantitative and qualitative, which is usually the best way to go. You can do just qualitative, you can do just quantitative. Secondary research will always be part of that plan. If you're working with a consultant who does not include secondary research, you need to have a conversation with them. They need to understand your organization. And then Agnes has some very good points about collaboration and inclusion when it comes to strategic planning.
Thanks, Cecilia. And I think you've pretty much covered the strategic focus. The view that we also take that from our experience that when we've worked with organization is that people make organization, and it's so important that everybody is engaged in the process. A practical example that came to mind was when I was evolving in my career and being involved in many organizations with strategic planning, is that I tune out when they talk about strategic planning, because at that point in my career, I didn't feel like I was part of the process. I was part of the organization. And as consultants, one of the things that we bring to the table, or how we try to help shape or guide your strategic planning process, is that we engage everybody in the process. Yes, there's going to be certain level of the organization leadership that would make the final decision, but the team as a whole needs to be engaged. They need to see where they fit in with this strategic planning that's going to shape the future of the organization as well as shape their own future. Think about it. If part of the resources that you need for your strategic planning or fulfillment of your strategic plan is human resources, it's technology, it's financial, these elements are people. These are the people that would bring this together and help it make it happen as well. So we like to help guide our clients to understand the importance of engagement across the board within the organization.
And that's a great point, and you said it very well, because if everybody's not going in the same direction, it makes it more difficult for the organization to be successful. And so that's a very good point. And I think we also should talk a little bit again about strategic planning is to support mission fulfillment. The strategic planning is not an end in its own right. Strategic planning is something you do to fulfill your organization's mission. So whether you are a 501c3, a 501c6, a 501c4, the successful organization is the mission-driven organization. Our mission at Rogue Tulips is to help 501c organizations thrive and grow and be successful in the 21st century. So that's our mission. And our vision is to support a thriving 501c community. So that is what drives us, is we want to give the best possible service to people that we can. And so being mission driven is what makes us all successful. So a 501c organization uses strategic planning to fulfill the mission. Again, the process itself is not the end, it's a tool. So that's why there's so many different kinds of strategic planning. Every facilitator has a different method. Every strategic planner has a different philosophical basis. No, some may not have a philosophical basis. Some may just come in and say, well, you need a goal and a strategy and a tactic. And speaking of those three basic parts of strategic planning, another thing to keep in mind is when you're working with the leadership, so the board of directors specifically, they set the direction and they should decide on what the goals are based on the data that's collected and presented to them. They can also suggest strategies and work on strategies. However, tactics are not the job of the board of directors. Tactics are the job of staff, and that's why you have a professional staff. So your staff's going to come up with a different work plan that's separate from your strategic plan. Now, why is that? Because tactics change, and they change quickly. And Agnes is nodding because she knows this as well. It's strategies and goals have longevity, tactics do not. I don't know, did you have any other insights on that, Agnes?
I think that was well captured, Cecilia. I was nodding and agreeing because that's where we find that clients get focused, at least leadership get focused, that their role is to implement tactics, but not so. That is the role of the staff. And that goes back to that point that if your staff is engaged from the beginning, maybe not on all the levels, but if there's an engagement there, they can then begin to figure out how they're going to help you implement the tactics. And that's why I was agreeing with you there, Cecilia.
Well, that's a good point, because boards are the leaders and they take that responsibility seriously. And sometimes we in the profession talk about people getting into the weeds. And really, that's kind of what tactics are for your board. It's not their job, and they really shouldn't worry about it that much. You should keep them apprised, but it's not their job to come up with the tactics and implement them. It is their job to know what's going on. So let's make sure that our boards stay focused, and let's make sure that our boards get the most out of their volunteer experience, because that's really another reason to keep them focused on direction and strategy and on goals. Whether you call the goals or objectives or pillars, use your own language, but let's make sure we keep our boards focused so that they get the most out of what they're doing by being a leader at your association and by contributing and giving that time, because we want everybody to have a good experience. And that's really why you have a board. You don't have the board to do the work, the daily operations of the organization. You have a board to set your direction. And so use them as that think tank, and let them know it's okay to let go of the tactics. They have a staff, or maybe they have an AMC and their staffs are an AMC, but they have people who can do that for them and keep them apprised of the achievement of the goals and the implementation of the strategies. And that's where you come up with metrics. You have to be able to measure whether or not something's working. And a lot of people used to, many years ago, do 5-year strategic plans. Thankfully, we've gotten away from that, because I think especially since 2008, when we had that huge hiccup in the economy, and people realized, wow, things can really change on a dime, as they used to say. And yeah, they can. And so looking at like a 3-year period is probably best, because you do want to do a little future forecasting. You want to look ahead a little bit. Where am I going to be? But if you go much farther past 3 years, you're probably going to end up being disappointed. And I think that's the most blunt way I can say it. So we don't want you to end up disappointed. So look at a 3-year plan, but also look at measuring things quarterly. That's what I tend to do. That's how I think. It's like, okay, I might have an 18-month plan for something, but I'm looking at it quarterly. Because what does that do? That gives you multiple opportunities for changing direction, for maybe implementing a new strategy, or going back to your board and saying, you know, it seems that this goal may not necessarily be a goal we want to work on any longer, because we're not getting any traction on it with the membership, or it just doesn't in the new marketplace seem to fit anymore. And those are great touch points throughout your plan, is every 3 months kind of look at it. 90 days, we use 90 days for a lot of things. I think it's because 3 is the magic number, 3 months, and there's 4 quarters in the year, and you can look at that. And we rate people as new employees in 90 days. We say that new CEOs have 90 days to figure everything out at the beginning. So 90 days is a good touch point, I think, that we all kind of agree on. What do you think about that, Agnes?
Well said, Cecilia. The only thing I have to add is just to remember why and for whose benefit the organization exists.
Yeah.
I think that's really the key here. Remember that. Why and for whose benefit the organization exists.
That's an excellent closing comment. We have just about a minute left today. And, Agnes, that's really the heart of the matter, is who is the organization there to serve? And if you're a charity or a foundation, you're probably serving people who need help. If you're a professional society, you're obviously serving the people in that profession. If you're a trade association, you're representing an industry. So keeping that in mind, why are you there? The why. Everybody likes to talk about Simon Sinek, and start with why. Well, why are you there? That's why you have a mission statement. The mission statement's the why, and the strategic plan's the how. And I think that's the best way to summarize it. So we want to thank you all for joining us for this episode of Strategic Planning and Mission Fulfillment. Keep in mind, strategic plans come in many forms. Pick the one that's best for you and then find a way to implement it, and make sure you involve the staff across the board and make sure they all understand it and how what they do supports the strategic plan. And you might have some times where things don't go completely smoothly, but you'll have a much more successful outcome by being more inclusive and having a great plan for implementation and keeping the board apprised of what's going on a regular basis. And make sure to adapt as the environment changes, which it does if we like it or not. So so that's pretty much our view in a nutshell of strategic planning and how we do it and why we think it's important. So any other closing thoughts before we sign off?
No, I think thank you to our audience for listening, and we look forward to seeing you at the next episode of Chatting with Agnes and Cecilia. Over to you, Cecilia.
And thank you, Agnes, for all your insights. And also, just keep in mind what we always say at the end of every episode. Take 15 minutes and talk to somebody because you might learn something. So that's our attitude, and hope you have a great week ahead, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.